So I finally took a ride in a Waymo, an autonomous taxi service from Google, and I have to say it was fantastic. No more idle chat with the driver because there was no driver. And want to rock your music loud? Not a problem. Or maybe you just want to sit in silence. No problem. And what about those articles that you have seen in the Washington Post? The ones about how scary it is to ride in a Waymo? Well, as a human driver alongside a Waymo in traffic, or a human passenger inside, I can tell you, just consider the source of those negative articles. Remember, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, and he also owns a Waymo competitor, Zoox, which is not yet operational. So there's a slight conflict of interest, I'd say. Personally, as a driver, I actually prefer to follow Waymo down the street. They're generally safe drivers. And as a passenger, I was pleased to see Waymo handle random pedestrians stepping off the curb. The car braked, patiently, waited, and then continued. Or when a driver tried to turn in front of the Waymo without signaling. Again, the Waymo waited patiently. Mostly, I just watch the graphics panels, which on a Waymo are way better than anything in a Tesla. The algorithms behind Waymo were those used in DARPA's Cybergrand Challenge, and over the last 10 years, Google has amassed millions of road miles in training against that. Which raises an interesting question. What if somebody were to obtain a Waymo, physically obtain the vehicle, say at the scene of a crash or by some other means? Could they obtain the algorithm stored in that vehicle? In other words, I'm sure there's something on the vehicle. It's just not connecting to the cloud. So is that data being protected? Now, what if we take that vehicle off the safe streets of San Francisco and put it in a hostile territory, a war zone like Ukraine? So what if the drone were shot down and recovered? Could an enemy get its data? Its algorithms? Sadly, these are very real-world concerns. And as we empower our gadgets to make our lives safer and more convenient, there is that dark side. In a moment, I'll introduce you to someone who is thinking about this problem today. This is a story about the risks associated with unmanned vehicles and remote servers, how data security is essential even in field locations without continuous cloud connectivity. I'm Robert Famosi. This is Error Code.
Hi, I'm Brent Hansen. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Cigent. Cigent provides secure storage solutions that are designed to work across different vehicle types to protect data at the edge.
So Brent is going to be talking about vehicle types. So I asked him to explain what he means by that.
We support everything from PCs to servers to operation technology to manned vehicles to unmanned vehicles to external hardware. So we're not limited to any specific device. We support a variety of devices with multiple different secure storage solutions.
So I'm in Northern California, and we have Waymos crawling our streets all the time. So in terms of unmanned vehicles, would that be an example?
Our focus is more on what the government's using. Now, that doesn't preclude someone like Waymo. On unmanned vehicles is an interesting new dynamic because when you think about data, you think about it from two different dimensions. One is those unmanned vehicles, whether it's Waymo or U.S. federal organization, are collecting data that they probably want to keep confidential if someone gets a hold of that particular device. On the other side, the algorithm that is being utilized to operate said unmanned vehicle is very valuable. That's what makes Waymo, right? Is the ability to put together a AI package that allows that vehicle to operate autonomously. So you're going to want to keep that secure as well. And of the two, I think most people think of, it's the collection of data. That's what's critical. If you're the unmanned vehicle manufacturer, what's really important for you is keeping your algorithm safe.
So this sounds like a traditional client-server model, if I'm hearing correctly. Or is that too much of an abstraction?
No, that's fair.
So the vehicle, in this case, is absorbing stuff about the environment and maybe seeing or sensing information that can be valuable to someone.
Correct. Let's take a different pack from Waymo. So I am in law enforcement and I'm surveilling a suspect or surveilling some other type of situations. If that unmanned vehicle becomes lost or stolen, which is very real possibility, do I really want whoever has access to this device, to be able to take that information off and consume it and say, oh, I see that law enforcement was looking at XYZ. The other side of the coin, of course, is, again, even if this is being operated with a, actual person utilizing it, you're still going to have technology on that you would not want in the hands of potential competitor or threat adversary. So, the reason why Cigent exists is over the last few years, there's been just a massive proliferation of devices operating at this proverbial edge. And the edge could be you and I, we're in unsecured environments, to someone in a very unsecured environment, i.e., they're operating in a hostile country, they're doing highly sensitive work. Either way, you have data on those devices. There was a point in time where everyone's like, oh, it's all going to go up to the cloud, right? No, especially not if we're talking about operators in a hostile world where you don't want to be sending stuff up and down to the cloud, which provides all kinds of telemetry about where you are and where your device is. So we need to be able to ensure the integrity of that data on, again, whether it's a PC, a server, an unmanned vehicle, a Waymo car. How do you make sure that data is protected, even again, when that device falls in the hands of a sophisticated adversary, and it's not simply, I got BitLocker on there.
So without getting into the weeds, how does product address this issue?
Without getting the weeds, it starts with the basics, right? So software-based encryption, hardware-based encryption. The next step up is pre-boot authentication, right? As we all know, without PBA, even a robust hardware-based encryption can be circumvented. Then we add multi-factor authentication to the PBA. So you have that element of, I have layers of encryption and I have a pre-boot authentication environment that's backed with multi-factor authentication. That is your absolute fundamental starting point. Then there are three things that we add to that, which I think are absolutely essential. The first is the ability to create hidden partitions. So I can partition our drive into multiple different environments, each with its own separate access. So going back to our Waymo car, right? You could have a single storage device collecting information about the environment, how fast I'm going, what pictures I'm taking, all those sort of things. And then on that same drive, have a hidden partition for your algorithm. So if someone does get a hold of this, they can look at that drive and they only see the less secure environment. Now, even there, they still have to break through our encryption and break through everything else, which I would argue they can't do. But at the very least, now we're creating a separate, highly controlled environment for that hidden partition. The other advantage of hidden partitions, this is especially important for organizations that are operating in questionable environments, like maybe overseas, is the concept of cloning and wiping, where I might get separated from my device that's active for a few seconds, and someone might try to go and pull data off it. With the hidden partitions, all of the data that's in those hidden partitions is still in a secure enclave. So even though the device is open and accessible, without our step-up authentication, you can't get access to that data. So that's number one. The second thing we offer is AI embedded storage. So we have algorithms within our storage devices themselves, which are continually monitoring data access patterns for nefarious behavior. Because it's actually with the data, you can't compromise the AI. You can't dupe it. It's looking for access patterns, right? You and I are going to have a standard way we get access to data. A nefarious actor is not going to follow that. It also will monitor the physical elements to it as well. Am I on the device I'm supposed to be on, or are you trying to unseat me to try to go around our controls? And of course, if it sees anything that's, questionable, we lock things down and keep the data protected. The third is the full lifecycle data. Everyone focuses on data when it's being utilized, but what happens when you no longer need that data? I think you're probably aware, and your viewers are probably aware, that data erasure is not 100% reliable. So we offer a remote crypto wipe and block wipe, but then we back this up with patented block by block analysis for verified data erasure. So we can actually ascertain if that device has been truly, completely, inevitably deleted, erased all data. And again, going back to our Waymo vehicle, maybe we shouldn't use that example. A quadcopter operating in a remote environment where it suddenly loses power and goes down, you may be able to go and flip a switch and know that everything on that thing is wiped out. And yes, so you say, okay, wait a second, you've already got it encrypted. Why would you also want to make sure it's erased? Because I'd rather have my data gone completely than just have it protected. Because obviously that quantum stuff's lurking out in the future. What better way to protect against quantum than to know the data's gone forever? Doesn't matter how much quantum power you got.
So I heard crypto wipe, and I just want to be clear that would be getting rid of all the keys.
The advantage of crypto wipe is it's instantaneous. I mean, it happens in split second. I can't remember our exact timing, but it's like a thousandth of a second before they're gone. So again, if you're thinking about like an unmanned vehicle where, okay, something is happening, it's going down, you want to be able to go and instantly do that, and those keys are gone.
So I'm really curious about the number of instances where it's likely that the vehicle is not communicating with the cloud. Is this becoming more and more of a thing, that it's not in contact with anything, that it's becoming truly autonomous?
There's definitely a movement towards that, right? Because it all depends on which environment we're talking about. But if we're talking about, operations in a highly hostile environment, you don't want to be sending any signals at all, because those signals could be detected, and then I know where that vehicle is. If you're transmitting with it, then they might be able to try and triangulate to you and where you're transmitting, and then say, okay, well, I know where you're at now. So it's like everything else, there's a spectrum here. There are those where it's, completely autonomous and not even talking to the cloud. There's those that are talking to cloud. There's fully operated control. In any of those situations, though, you're still going to be, as a unmanned vehicle operator, putting valuable IP on that device. And you're not going to want to have that IP in the hands of someone who might then reverse engineer it and figure out a better way to do a mousetrap or any sort of other activity.
So staying with the commercial side, I've written about autonomous vehicles that leave a city and go out on roads less traveled. They don't have Wi-Fi. They don't have access to satellite communications. They don't have cellular. Is that a believable scenario?
That's outside of my domain. I mean, I would say yes, but I just don't know. And so I wouldn't want to hypothesize. What I can tell you is the data on that I can make sure is protected.
So we've talked a lot about the client side, then back on the server side, the other side. That's where the magic is performed.
On the edge. So I'm not in data centers, right? My focus is any device that might fall into or be accessed physically by a malicious actor. Now, why do I mention servers? Yes, most servers are sitting in highly secure data centers with fences and cameras and guys with guns. There is a growing number, I should say, of servers that are in insecure field locations. And as we both know, servers are no longer the giant refrigerator-sized monoliths. A blade server is 25, 35 pounds, highly mobile. So what happens if I'm in a remote location and I have a server with, significant amounts of data, and I have to evacuate that location quickly, right? Or gosh forbid, someone breaks in and has access to the server and tries to steal it. Either way, just like I want to keep the data on my PC safe, a server, presuming it's going to hold a much larger volume of data, is even more important to keep safe. So again, the things that we talked about starts off with your, encryption, both software and hardware. Where applicable, we have pre-boot authentication and multi-factor authentication, and then being able to also execute true verified data erasure is invaluable if you're on a server side of the house.
So Bill also looks at the physical aspects of the drive. There are standards, if I remember correctly, FIPS 140 or something, and that talks about the different layers of compromise on a physical device.
We support your standard. I could probably make your head hurt and everyone else's head hurt talking about all the different credential support, but FIPS 140-2 is the one you were referencing. Our drives and our software are CSFC for DAR approved. That stands for commercial solutions for classified for data at rest. We have NIAP certifications, NIST certifications. So the answer is yes. By and large, the biggest risk is not some sort of physical nefarious action now. It is now, once I have access to your device, using any myriad of approaches to be able to then access the data, right? And that's why it's no longer simply, hey, I threw some software encryption on there. There's just multiple ways that a advanced threat actor is going to compromise that before we even start talking about quantum. So, looking at the NSA and some of their standards and the DISA, which are two of the leading, groups in terms of setting credentials and standards, it's having layers. It's a combination of software and hardware. It's having that pre-boot authentication environment, which is so critical because obviously once you start that boot process, that's where an actor can quickly circumvent a lot of the different approaches. It's having multi-factor authentication. And then again, what our perspective is, then you add additional layers to ensure that cloning and wiping is prevented even when the device may be active. It is having an AI capability that's built into the storage itself. And then thinking about the life cycle, thinking about being able to delete, permanently erase data is absolutely essential.
So we've talked about vehicles, both manned and unmanned, but it also extends to drones as well.
Yeah, we think of drones as unmanned vehicles.
So this is a very broad definition of the word vehicle.
That is our constituents. That's how they use that term. So unmanned vehicle is basically, when we look at it as UXV, so it could be unmanned aerial vehicle. It could be unmanned, underwater vehicle. It could be unmanned ship. I mean, you're seeing that. I mean, I don't want to speak in any great detail about the actual, broader geopolitical situation, but if you look at what's happening in Ukraine and just how big of a role drones and unmanned vehicles are playing, this is going to be an important part of future defense. And there's certainly the concept of, the rotors and the construction and how fast and how far it flies. But as we've learned in this new digital age, a big part of their success is going to be how effective are they at determining if this is an adversary or a neutral party, being able to hide in plain sight or being able to source power for their places. That's where we get into their algorithms and capabilities. And that's where it becomes important to make sure that data is safe and protected, even when those highly vulnerable devices are in a very hostile environment.
So in financial services, you've got hardware security models, HSMs. Is that an area that we might see this product as well?
We are certainly applicable to that area. It's not an area of focus for us just because there's such a very rich and bountiful opportunity in, the federal space, the defense industrial base, law enforcement, Border Patrol, Department of State. But absolutely, it is certainly applicable to our space. Anyone really in critical infrastructure is highly relevant.
I guess my analogy with HSM is that it's applicable across different critical infrastructures.
In my mind, the HSM is the concept is, okay, how are we making sure that the data remains safe and consistent And that's what we do. Obviously, we're a device by device type environment. So, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning of this is like operational technology. So, because we have a support for a variety of different drives and drives types, we didn't talk about, we have, everything from 2230 SDs to SD and micro SD cards. We have external media. You can start looking at, okay, well, I'm in the energy and I have a power plant and I want to make sure that the data on that power plant remains protected because there's confidential elements to that. We could support that world. Healthcare, right? I mean, they're right now using a lot of BitLocker, and Microsoft does a great job at providing base level security. But if you want to talk about more advanced level security and you really want to make sure those drives are protected, we would say you need to have a hard drive encryption approach. Oil and gas exploration, right? You now are talking about very expensive undertakings. You are talking about very big investments, and you're now probably in locations that might not be really that safe and secure. So again, an opportunity to make sure that that data is safe. So I can go on and on. If you pick your critical infrastructure, and I can probably find a use case. I think one of the foundational pieces of this, and what happened with CrowdStrike recently kind of raises is so much of the industry has been focused on this detect and respond paradigm, right? That we've almost built that into it. When we're talking about devices on the edge, like PCs, like remote servers, it's all about, I'm going to spot the bad guy and I'm going to stop them from doing something before they actually can do bad stuff. Because of that, you have to have a very active update schedule, right? Because the bad guys are constantly changing. And absolutely that stuff's essential. Endpoint detection response, absolutely fundamental, successful. I hope CrowdStrike gets, kind of everything back in order and effective again as soon as possible. But I think we also need to be thinking more about proactive protection. If your data is encrypted using a mature encryption algorithm, you have step authentication and zero trust control on that device. Even when that device gets compromised, whether it's a remote attack or a physical attack, the data remains protected. And it feels like the industry has gotten so caught up in identify and catch. We're going to stop the bad guy before they do it, versus, hey, can we just absolutely start with making sure that the thing that matters, the data, is absolutely fundamentally protected, utilizing layered encrypted defenses.
I'm curious about quantum safe encryption. Is that something that is being looked at as well?
We are. So we have researchers in our organization who are working with federal agencies on next generation encryption technology. I personally don't like the term quantum safe because I think it's a misnomer in presuming that we know where quantum is going and that we can build something that will forever protect against quantum. And, the latest news is always quantum's accelerating faster than we expected. Can we build encryption that makes quantum, let me rephrase that. Is it possible to have encryption that pushes back the envelope when quantum might be able to compromise it? Absolutely. I would also come back to the safest way to ensure that your data is not compromised at some later point is through erasure. We have been told by organizations whom we work with that there are countries who are collecting encrypted data on the expectation at some point they're going to have quantum capabilities and they're going to be able to encrypt it or decrypt it, excuse me. So, I would go down the path of, verified erasure. That being said, again, we do have work underway. We'll continue to look at what is the next generation of cryptology, which can push back the envelope of when quantum might be able to compromise.
So we talked about the scale of your devices, and we talked about all these protections and so forth. I'm wondering about the opposite. How small can you get with a drive?
We actually offer 2230. We're unique in that.
2230 refers to the SSD's form factor, with 22 indicating its width in millimeters. The important part is the length, known by the 30. So, 2230 SSDs, which are very compact, are commonly found in tablets, laptops, and even Xbox consoles.
On a PC, 2230 is basically the new footprint for your smaller, lighter notebooks. So, for example, Microsoft's line of devices runs on 2230s. The new Dell Latitudes are all on 2230, as are the HP Envy. So we get down to the smallest in terms of that. As I mentioned, we also offer SD and micro SD cards. They're wildly prolific in the environment, and they also often contain highly confidential information. So we offer encrypted SD and micro SD cards. We also offer embedded cards. So if you're looking for a BGA SD, we can offer that. And again, that goes back to our conversation around both manned and unmanned vehicles.
So why aren't we seeing solutions like this in the market today?
Well, one thing I would say is, if you were to ask me, like, what's the biggest inhibitor to adoption? It is this continual state of doing the same thing I've done before. All right. So there's no real reason that organizations that have sensitive data should not be making what is relatively an insignificant investment into ensuring that that data is protected. It's not creating a procurement issue in terms of time and cost. It doesn't create a whole bunch of friction for an end user. I mean, requiring a second authentication when you're booting up seems to be a pretty logical step to be making if you have sensitive data on an edge device. It really is just natural historical behavior. And again, going back to something I said earlier around, we need to start treating that sensitive data as absolutely fundamentally important, not just come from the concept of I'm going to detect someone and I'm going to prevent them to. I know that the data on my device is protected. I know it's protected if that device gets lost or stolen. I know it's protected even when the device is activated because I have step-up authentication, which is really a form of zero trust authentication, which I think is a very valuable tool that's not being fully utilized by the security community.
I'd like to thank Brent for coming on the show and talking about securing data that's in the field with a very broad definition of what a vehicle might be. As we get more and more autonomous devices in our world, they have a lot of proprietary data to secure when active and to securely dispose of when no longer needed. It's good to see that someone is thinking ahead about all that today. Hey, if you're enjoying Error Code, tell a friend. I'm sure there are other people out there who like narrative information security podcasts. And I'd really like to hear from you. Join us on Discord. Search for Error Code Podcast to join the server, or go to errorcodepodcast.com to get more details. And tell me what you like, and even what you don't. I've got some great episodes coming up, including more on hacking water facilities. Subscribe today. I don't want you to miss out.